What if I told you that for a lot of households in Tasmania, not having solar could be costing them well over $1,000 every year? Not in theory, not based on mainland averages, and not based on hype. I'm talking about real Tasmanian conditions, real electricity pricing, and realistic household usage. Because the conversation around solar has changed. A few years ago, people were asking, does solar even make sense in Tasmania? Now the better question is, what is it costing you not to have it? And once you actually look at the numbers, doing nothing can be a lot more expensive than most people realise. I'm going to walk you through the Tasmanian averages, how the numbers work, what a typical household might be missing out on, and why waiting could be costing you more than you think. Hi, I'm Brad. A lot of people still think of solar as a sometime later decision. Something they'll look at next year, or when power prices go up again, or when they feel more ready. But here's the problem with that thinking. Every quarter you wait, you keep paying full retail electricity prices. And if your roof could already be generating a large chunk of your daytime power, then waiting is not neutral. It has a cost. That's the big mindset shift here. Because for many Tasmanians, the question is no longer, can solar save me money? The question is, how much money am I losing by not having it already? Let's start with a realistic baseline. The Tasmanian Economic Regulator shows that the most common residential setup is still the Aurora Tariff 31 and Tariff 41 combination. And for the median household on that setup, average annual electricity use is about 7,254 kilowatt hours per year. That gives us a solid reference point for a typical home. When you apply current regulated Tasmanian tariff rates to that level of usage, you end up with roughly $1,700 plus per year in electricity usage costs before solar savings even enter the picture. So right away, we can see something important. Even in Tasmania, where many people assume power is relatively affordable compared to parts of the mainland, households are still spending serious money on electricity every year. And that creates an opportunity. Because when you are paying retail rates for power that your roof may be able to generate itself, that gap becomes the solar opportunity. This is where one of the biggest myths needs to be cleared up. There are still plenty of people in Tasmania who think solar doesn't really stack up here because it's colder, cloudier, or further south. But that's outdated thinking. Solar works on light, not heat, and modern systems can still generate very solid output in Tasmania. Aurora's own guidance shows that a properly sized residential solar system in Tasmania can generate a meaningful amount of electricity each day. A mid-sized system, like a 6.6 kilowatt system, can realistically produce enough electricity over the year to offset a major portion of an average household's usage. So no, Tasmania is not too cold for solar. And no, being further south does not mean solar doesn't work. The real issue is not whether solar works. The real issue is whether your household is still paying for electricity that you could have been producing yourself. Now let's make this simple. Solar creates value in two ways. The first and most important is this. When your home uses the solar power it is generating during the day, you avoid buying that electricity from the grid. That is where the strongest savings come from. The second is that any extra power you don't use can be exported back to the grid for a feed-in credit. But here's the key point. The electricity you avoid buying is worth a lot more than the electricity you export. That means solar is most valuable when your home uses more of its own daytime generation. So if you are at home during the day, work from home, run appliances in daylight hours, heat water during the day, or charge an EV while the sun is out, solar becomes even more valuable. This is why two homes with the same solar system can get very different financial outcomes. It is not just about system size. It is about how well your household uses the power your roof is producing. Now let's get to the real question. What might not having solar actually be costing a Tasmanian household? Using a realistic average scenario for Tasmania, a typical mid-sized solar system could be worth somewhere in the range of around $1,000 to $1,700 per year, depending on how much of that solar power is used in the home versus exported. A practical midpoint is around $1,400 per year. So think about that for a second. If your household is suited to solar and you delay for 1 year, that could mean around $1,400 in missed value. Wait 3 years and that is more than $4,000. Wait 5 years and now you are talking about roughly $7,000 in missed savings. That is the part many people miss. They focus on the cost of installing solar, but they ignore the cost of not having it. And in many cases, the cost of waiting ends up being one of the biggest costs of all. This is where the conversation changes. Most people look at solar and ask, how much does it cost? But world-class decision-making asks a better question. What is it costing me not to solve this? Because doing nothing feels safe. It feels familiar. It feels like the low-risk option. But in reality, doing nothing often means staying exposed to retail electricity prices, missing the value your roof could already be producing, and continuing to hand over money every quarter for power that could have been partially offset. So the real comparison is not solar costs money versus doing nothing costs nothing. That is not true. The real comparison is investing in solar versus continuing to pay the hidden cost of not having it. And once people see it that way, the numbers start to make a lot more sense. Some households feel the cost of not having solar more than others. For example, families with higher than average electricity bills, people working from home, homes with electric hot water, households with pool pumps or regular daytime appliance use, people charging electric vehicles, and anyone who wants more control over their energy costs. These homes often have the most to gain because they have more opportunity to use solar power in real time. And the more solar power you self-consume, the better the return tends to be. That is why a proper solar assessment matters, because averages are useful, but your roof, your habits, and your energy use are what determine the real number. The biggest mistake in solar marketing is oversimplifying it. People do not need more hype. They need clarity. They need realistic numbers. They need local context. And they need someone to explain how the economics actually work in their situation. Solar is not magic. It is just maths. If your roof is suitable, your usage is there, and the system is designed properly, then solar can be one of the most practical ways to reduce long-term household energy costs, especially when you frame it correctly. Not as a trendy upgrade, not as a nice to have, but as a way of reducing the ongoing cost of buying electricity at retail prices. So what is it costing you not to have solar these days in Tasmania? For many households, a fair answer is probably somewhere around $1,000 to $1,700 per year. And for a lot of homes, around $1,400 a year is a realistic middle ground figure. That means waiting is not free. It has a real cost. And when you stretch that cost over 3, 5, or 10 years, it becomes obvious why more homeowners are now asking a different question. Not, should I look into solar one day, but how much longer do I want to keep paying for electricity my roof could already be helping me produce? That is the real conversation. And that is why solar in Tasmania is no longer just about panels. It is about avoiding unnecessary energy costs. If you are what that number might look like for your own home, the next step is simple. Get your roof, usage and tariff looked at properly. Because the averages are interesting, but your actual number is what matters most. Your power bill is already telling a story. The question is whether your roof could be changing it.